My name is Robert Ogan. I work at ByteSpeed. My email is on the screen right now, rogan@bytespeed.com. You can email me or David, who is the other presenter. He will be co-hosting today. David is from Cradlepoint, and that is his email up there as well. Today we're going to be talking about how you can leverage the wireless WAN for equitable remote learning. So to start off, talk a little bit about Cradlepoint and how you can make sure that you're going into this kind of uncertain time and making some pretty big decisions. You want to make sure that you make it with a company that's stable, that's amazing, that's going to be there. And I think one of the first things that you should know is, according to a recent Beecham report, that Cradlepoint is the worldwide leader in enterprise WAN routers with 4G integration, and soon to be 5G integration around the corner. They're a privately held company with a headquarters in Boise, Idaho. They're the second largest cloud managed networking company in the world. And I think in Gartner 2015, they were a cool vendor for SD-WAN capabilities, and still have, to me, one of the best SD-WAN capabilities in the market. David, I don't know if there's anything you want to add at any point. You can certainly go ahead.
The 50% of Fortune 100 companies, as well as the Fortune 500, you can look at virtually any of the places that you go every day. Starbucks is definitely going to be one of those. FedEx is one of those. As far as the Raising Cane's from the retail food, quick serve type restaurant, Fuzzy's Tacos, the big names were there. As far as transportation, your biggest names, your New York Transit Authority, your Chicago Metros, we are there. Of course, your major police departments, we're involved with that. And what we're going to get into today, as far as some of the solutions we're offering for K through 12, there's some pretty sizable school districts that we've already engaged with and have our product in place to provide that connectivity for the students who are doing remote learning.
Okay. So, essentially, you can rest assured that they're a market leader, and you're going to be safe with a company that's going to be there for you, and ByteSpeed. So how can all households learn from home? I think this is a big question. The big important things are, day one connectivity, having a solution that you can send home with a student that they can plug into the wall and instantly have access to the internet, so that there's no real excuses for not being able to get to the web. They don't get internet at their house, whatever it is. You need this hassle-free day one connectivity. There also needs to be security, usage parameters that are pre-programmed into NetCloud in a cloud-managed software that can't just be bypassed by resetting the device to factory defaults. All policies need to be able to be managed centrally from one place. You need to have a way to do content filtering, preventing malware, viruses. It needs carrier-grade connectivity, it needs to be high performance, and it needs to be scalable from dozens to hundreds or even thousands of devices. The two primary solutions that we highlight in our household connection are the IBR 600 and the IBR 900 endpoints. There are some differences in them. We'll talk a little bit about those more later. One of the biggest differentiators between the two solutions that you need to be aware of is the IBR 600 is the entry-level solution, but it doesn't have a way NetCloud-wise to bake in SIPA-compliant protection. So if you're going to go with the entry-level 600, it's a good device. It'll serve the purpose, but you do need a way, either through tunneling back to your own home school for filtering, or device-based filtering, or a third-party application like Zscaler or Osvi to be able to do SIPA compliant filtering on the IBR 600. If you move into the IBR 900, it can be part of NetCloud. You can have SIPA filter baked right into the NetCloud environment and the 900. So this is an ideal time for critical deployments. You know, we have landline services that can take months to deploy, or maybe they can't get broadband to certain places via landline. Service providers have physical limitations, and there's a big, long process at times. Cradlepoint network connectivity services get around all those things. They give you a faster time to revenue and high availability. So for you, it wouldn't be necessarily the revenue piece. It would be faster time to being able to provide the exact same services from home that you can from your school.
Not only that, Robert, if I may for a second, this scenario here is going to be very much geared towards the school building itself or the administrative headquarters to curtail any internet outages that they may experience. So, you know, you talk about, you've got VoIP phones here and things like that. This is going to be able to keep in a normal day, you know, nationwide pandemic where the children are all back on campus for school and all the buildings are open, you know, internet outages do happen. So this would be a solution that would you very much want to make sure that, you know, a school had to continue to provide internet services, especially when you start talking about, you know, voice over IP circuits. If the internet goes down, you can't call 911 if the power goes out and somebody gets hurt. So having that internet connection at a school or an admin building is going to be crucial, and that's really what this depicts here.
Yeah, and this is really nice too, because if you do have the ability to have this backup connection without having to have another separate landline that could get cut, and things like payroll needs to go out or whatever, and your main line is down, this is a nice failover to LTE there. So with the solution for especially the schools and what they're doing, what we're going to provide as far as getting your students back up and connected in their household, we have this slide that compares what many provide and what we provide. So what many people out there are doing is they're providing consumer grade hotspots. You know, your little Verizon MiFi or the little USB dongles that can connect one device up per device that you're buying, per hotspot. So the issues there, they're really basic security. Students can usually bypass with a factory reset to get around any that you do put in there. They're unmanaged, so you have to individually configure the devices. They're breakable, they're easy to lose, and they're per device solution. So if you have 4,000 students, you have to have 4,000 devices. Even if two or three of those, or even 4 of those students all live in the same household, you still have to have each one have their own device. What we're providing is an enterprise grade hardware. It's ruggedized, it's purpose built to do this specific thing. It has enterprise class security. It is cloud manageable. So you can have an entire fleet of devices, one login, one little GUI that you go to and configure all of them. And it's a per household solution. So if you had 3 students in the house, it only requires one piece of hardware. So it could require 1/3 or 1/2 of the hardware. I know in the district, when I was a technology coordinator, my district had about 4,800 students, but we only had about 2,600 households. So that tells you right there that we had about half as many households as we had students. These are the packages that we go from. So package 1 is that entry-level package, that IBR 600C. It's the very good essentials. It has good performance. It's the lowest price point, and you have to find a way to provide your own filtering. So I'm going to pause real quick. We have a question from Daniel. It says, can we have a recording of this webinar later? Yes. So this is being recorded, and we will be able to provide a recording of this and the PowerPoint as well at a later date. So package number 2 is kind of the medium level package. This is an IBR 900 with a 600 meg modem. It has the essentials and advanced. It has better performance than the opening one, and it has a moderate price point. The nice thing about the IBR 900, this package in particular, it makes it kind of my favorite package, is that with the advanced here, you get SIPA filtering baked right into the router itself. So you send the device home, and you know without doubt that you can see from your NetCloud that anything that's connecting to that and using the district provided internet is going to be SIPA filtered. So that's probably my favorite thing about this package as a former tech coordinator, is that I can be fully assured that, you know, no matter what, the student is going to be filtered if they're using the bandwidth that I'm providing. And package number 3 is the 900 with a better modem in it. So it has the 1200 meg modem with the same package, so you can still do SIPA filtering. So my recommendation for that is, if you have a household that you know is going to have 3 or 4 or more students in it, this would be a better package for that solution. So Cradlepoint solutions in the school bus. So Cradlepoint, above and beyond what ByteSpeed is doing with offering household internet solutions, has the ability to put Cradlepoint routers on the bus and either provide everyday school bus Wi-Fi, provide neighborhood Wi-Fi, provide parking lot Wi-Fi, whatever works for you in order to provide internet for the community or specific students in whatever way works best. Cradlepoint can do that as well. So you can connect 100 students at a time with these solutions that are listed here. They get access to LTE with any major carrier. It can do dual carrier capable and about 300-foot Wi-Fi radius. Now that obviously does greatly vary depending on distance and things like, you know, concrete manufacturing plant on one side of the bus would tend to stop things a little bit. So that 300-foot is very much a changes depending on the environment variables. David, do you want to add some stuff here?
Yeah, absolutely. So spot on about the Wi-Fi, you know, distance. Obviously, it's always something that you have to take into consideration. I mean, I get asked probably once a week, how far is the Wi-Fi going to go on this thing? And, you know, if you're doing any Wi-Fi deployment, whether it be in building or outdoors or in a bus or something like that, the answer to that question should always be, it depends. But to Robert's point, if you notice, the product here in the bottom is the IBR 900, which is also one of the package 2 and 3 that Robert mentioned for in-home use. It speaks to the flexibility of these devices and the fact that they can be used to deploy in a school bus, to park it in a neighborhood somewhere, much like we did with Coachella Valley School District some years ago, that turns the bus into a roving hotspot, and it was wired straight into the vehicle electrical system on the accessory circuit. It had timers set in it to where it would turn on at a certain time and then turn off at a certain time, so as not to drain the battery. But it provided a Wi-Fi hotspot bubble for multiple students in, say, one little neighborhood or maybe an apartment complex could use. And then, of course, if you need more than, you know, 5 to 10 students to be able to access that hotspot and leverage it, then the 1700 comes in, as its Wi-Fi is much more scalable on up to the about 50 or so when you layer in content filtering. So
yeah, and I think it's not only flexible in the fact that you can put different antennas on it, but also the fact that you can you're totally vendor agnostic with regard to carriers. So you can do AT&T, Verizon, you know, T-Mobile, whatever it is that works best in your area, you can use in these devices as well. We do have a question, David. Jonathan Smith asked, I've heard rumors that Wi-Fi on buses may become E-rate eligible. Any word on that? So that one, you know, I don't work at USAC, obviously, but I have worked in the field and I have heard the same rumors, and I've heard and read quite a bit on it. I would think that it's only kind of a matter of time before providing internet to students from home or in any way is a result of this COVID thing, where we're going to have some solution for a better solution for remote education. It seems only natural to me that both the mobile bus solution and these Wi-Fi in the home would be E-rate eligible at some point. Do I
So
know it's going to happen? But I don't know.
yeah, so just to note, Cradlepoint now, obviously ByteSpeed is an expert in working with schools, but to bolster that expertise, Cradlepoint does have an in-house contracts expert, or a couple of them now. The leader of that team is a man named Mitch, and if ever it comes up or we need more definitive information, we can obviously get in touch with Mitch, and he'll run it to ground for us as well.
Yeah, so John, if you email me afterward, I can try to get a more definitive answer for you from like Mitch or some of the actual USAC employees. I think a lot of it is conjecture right now, but to me, I wouldn't think there'd be any way they could not fund these as part of E-rate, but that is a lot of opinion on my part. So. Installing Wi-Fi for school buses, you can create temporary pop-up networks. It's a very simple installation. You pop it up and install without power in the bus, or it can run off of the battery, and the ruggedized solution. So I think the primary, and correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the primary requirements for these 900s at least was to go in cop cars. So, these are like metal devices. They're designed to take shock, vibration. They're ruggedized, and they have a really good range of operating temps. So these aren't little plastic, routers. These are kind of meant to take a licking and keep on ticking. So. Cradlepoint solutions in the bus. So you can deploy Cradlepoint in-vehicle routers. Students can complete homework on long commutes. You can do neighborhood Wi-Fi. Many of the school districts started doing that. Connected solutions, the camera, attendance, panic buttons. And then you have the really amazing feature of having them all in NetCloud Manager. So once they're in NetCloud Manager, you can monitor their network performance and all those things. You can make fleet-wide configuration adjustments. You can uphold CIP compliance, and you can do some pretty cool things with things like tracking and stuff like that, depending on the router that you get and the package that you get, right, David?
That is correct.
Okay. So security and IoT, this is like like a fries with that type of thing that you get in many ways. So, if you want to hook up and be able to remotely view your video surveillance, your digital signage, kiosks, anything like that, even HVAC, a lot of places use Cradlepoint because of the security that's provided to access their internal building things or provide access. If you wanted to provide a company, an HVAC company, with access to your HVAC system without punching holes in your firewall, you can use Cradlepoint in that way too, and it's much more secure than punching holes in your firewall.
So I want to build on this real quick, Robert. Yep. Just so everybody understands, this is an air-gapped individual network, okay? And you don't have to do it that way. You can do it one of two ways, okay? One is you can set your HVAC up on its own network. It only gets managed through the internet using cellular via a Cradlepoint, a ruggedized Cradlepoint router, or maybe even a not so ruggedized one. And then that way, even if your HVAC vendor, you think of Target some years ago, it was because of an HVAC vendor that people got in and did some rather nasty things with people's credit cards. If they get into this, it's not connected to anything else, okay? It's strictly just the HVAC system, okay? But also, if you did decide you wanted to keep it on the network and maybe, you know, build out a VLAN segment for that, and still have cellular as a failover. You can even have just that traffic come in or out over the cellular modem instead of the wireline. Cradlepoint has regular branch routers that can provide that functionality as well. So with this type of scenario, whether you want to go air gap or provide cellular failover and then VLAN that traffic over cellular only for something like HVAC, you can do that as well. So there's more than one way to skin the cat, so to speak.
All right. Another ideal usage for Cradlepoint is out-of-band management. David, I think I'll let you talk to this one if that's all right. I think you're probably a lot better set up to speak to out-of-band management.
Yeah, not a problem. So out-of-band management, as we know, was traditionally handled in the case of an internet outage. You had an old US Robotics 14.4 or 28.8 modem stuck on your router, connected via serial connection, and then you could use a very expensive wireline, old-fashioned dial-up type voice line to dial in and check that router out and make sure it was in good health, or there weren't any route loops from the change you made the night before, or what have you. What out-of-band management was something like our CB850, which is a failover device, okay? It's not a primary router or a ruggedized router. It allows you to get into that router using the cellular connection, which is going to be much less expensive, as well as be able to access the third-party GUI of that device through our NetCloud Manager, which I will be showing you here later. NetCloud Manager is of course, our web cloud-based management component for all of our devices, but it can also be used for third-party devices, both to access their CLI if they have one, as well as their GUI interface as well. And I'll be showing that later. So all the while saving yourself money on expensive wireline voice lines, which are becoming increasingly expensive because the telcos don't want to support them anymore.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the coolest things, almost one of the hardest things to believe when I'm going through stuff, is that, you know, you can have a device that has nothing to do with Cradlepoint, but if it's on the other side of this, you can get in through NetCloud and manage that device. So super cool. All right, so we talked a lot about NetCloud, network management with NetCloud. We've said that word probably 20 times in the last 5 minutes. It gives you the ability to configure all devices from one location. It gives you the ability to manage and update firmware of each device from one location. You can manage the clients that are on them, monitor signal strength. It gives you GPS tracking capabilities depending on the device, and security applications that are included with the device. So SIPA compliance, things like those. And now I suppose without any further ado, David, do you want to please take over and show everybody what NetCloud looks like?
Yes, absolutely. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I believe you have to stop sharing. Okay, so is everybody able to see my screen?
I gotcha.
All right. So this is our NetCloud login. We do support multi-factor authentication if you're worried about, if you'd like to have that extra layer of security using Google Authenticate or Okta or Microsoft Authenticator or RSA or anything like that. Once you're in, you're going to see a list of the routers that you have on your network. Now, obviously, the little green and white check boxes means it's online, it's sunny day. Anything with a red, it's offline for whatever reason. So at a glance, you have some very good information about the status of your devices. From an ease of management perspective, we allow a whole host of capabilities here, from upgrading the firmware of your device to changing the carrier modem firmware as well. If you're changing from, say, AT&T to Verizon, or Verizon to T-Mobile, or whoever you're doing, you can do all that as well. But obviously, you still have to go and touch the router to change out the SIM cards for those carriers, but the fact of the matter is it then becomes very easy. One of the really great things about our products is the feature parity of the GUI. The GUI interface of the branch E3000 router looks the same as the GUI of the IBR 600C or the 1700, save for a couple little differences where you're going to see additional things in like the 1700, like programming the GPIO ports for turning a contact closure on or off, or shutting the router down if it's tied into a vehicle accessory circuit so as not to drain the battery, things like that. From there, we mentioned SIPA compliance, obviously going to be one of the biggest things, most important things to a school. And I want to show how easy that is to do or accomplish on a branch or mobile router like the IBR 900. Again, as we mentioned, the IBR 600C is not going to have that. You would have to VPN all that traffic back to your school's head end and let the school head end be responsible for applying any SIPA filters, or use a third-party solution like a Zscaler, which is actually available in a Cradlepoint part number. So, or if you have existing Zscaler umbrella, you can go ahead and leverage that if you've got enough licenses. So either way, there's a way to get there, whichever option you choose. But I'm going to go ahead and show how to apply a SIPA filter in my router, my E3000 here. I'm going to go ahead and tick mark that device. I'm going to go to Configuration, Edit, and then I'm going to go to Security. And if I have the advanced package, which is what is required for this, I can then apply this CP Secure Web Filter. Now, if I've got Zscaler or Umbrella, it's all going to be there. And then I can choose whether or not to allow traffic by default or anything that's uncategorized. Now, I do have a child at home, so I have her items and things that she does VLANed off, okay? I allow her to stream media on Netflix for certain times of the day, but what I don't allow is if I'm in a failover state and I'm failed over cellular, I don't allow that traffic to go out over the cellular network. That gets cut off right away, okay? So to apply that, what I can do is choose the filtering policy, okay? And I can just call it whatever I want. I can hit add, call it whatever I want. In this case, I call it child safe. And then there's a profile here, SIPA compliant. Now by default, SIPA compliant, I think blocks about 30 categories, and I went ahead and added one, or 32 categories, and I took one away. I can't remember, but I think I took off hacking, which is something that wasn't necessarily blocked. I went ahead and blocked that, okay? These categories, our SIPA filter is provided to us by Webroot, an industry leader in antivirus, anti-malware, and obviously this sort of filtering capability. So the engine is a hybrid. The filters and categories are pushed to our product, okay? But it's actually looking at it locally. So it is using processor memory and power, which you're not going to have an issue with because it is very minute. But it is using processor memory and power versus going out over a proxy and slowing the internet connection down. That's the difference between us, our version, and a Zscaler or an Umbrella, okay? So depending on what you're after and what's important to you, you make those decisions accordingly. And of course, us and ByteSpeed are here to advise and guide you on that, okay? So once that's done, you hit save and save again. Best practice when programming a router, hit every single save button you see, and then hit commit changes, and it'll push those changes within seconds to that router, okay? Now, let's say you've got 100 routers out there, okay? But you know that they're all going to get the same thing. They're all going to get roughly the same thing, same Wi-Fi SSID, and the same SIPA filters. Rather than touch every single router, okay, you can leverage what we call groups. And you can create a group. All the same product has to be in a group. You can't mix and match products in a group, but we can call this just school district. And we're going to put in, they're going to be IBR 900s, okay, because we're sending them home with the students. So we're going to choose IBR 900. We're going to choose the NetCloud OS, okay, so you can choose all the way back to some earlier releases should you need to. But this is also consequently how you would upgrade firmware or sandbox it. We're going to choose the latest. We're going to hit OK. I'm going to go find that group. And I'm going to apply my SIPA filter to the primary network in the device. child safe. You want to make sure you're turning safe search on. You can apply it to one network or all networks in the device. We're going to go ahead and do all in case we get some. Let's face it, some of these kids are pretty sharp and they will figure out a way around it. And then we're going to apply a profile. SIPA compliant. Boom, there it is, 31 categories. Save. As we said, hit save again. Now, obviously, if you find some websites that didn't get picked up by the filter, you can add them here in custom categories and then go into that policy and block it. And then you commit the changes. Now, what'll happen is any router from the device menu that you tick mark and then move to that group will then take on that group's properties. So you have now applied a SIPA filter to 100 or 1,000 routers en masse within seconds, okay? Then if you need to, you can go touch each individual router if you were going to say, have each one have its own unique identifier or separate VLAN or separate IP addressing scheme per network in case you did have to do some VPNing for whatever reason, you could still do that. And that would be a little more time intensive. But as far as the basic cookie cutter configuration that every student's router will have, groups makes it a ton easier. Does that make sense, everybody? Okay. Last thing I want to show, well, two last things. These fields here, name, description, asset identifier, are editable, okay? You can click the little picture of the pencil there and you can give it a name. So if you can keep a spreadsheet or something of which router was given to which student or household, you could then identify it as such so you know where it is. But what's interesting is you can then take something like this 600, IBR 600C, which has active GPS. Now our Cradlepoint doesn't, Cradlepoint routers don't necessarily do real-time GPS, so turn by turn. You're gonna go to a third party like IntelliTrax if you want to provide turn by turn directions to a bus driver who's filling in for another bus driver and doesn't necessarily know their route. At least our router will spit out that raw information for a third party AVL software to make heads or tails of. But what we can do is GeoView, and it shows us a Google map where that router is. So there, now you all know where I live. If you want to see something a little more in detail, it's not out in the street. It's accurate to within a few feet. There's my house right there. I'm sitting right there overlooking my porch. So now you guys have an idea of where I am and where what my house looks like. But you can do breadcrumbing. So if this router were to move, you'd be little pinpoints along the map where I went. But also this is crucial if you wanted to set up a geofence. So a geofence is send an alert if the router moves out of this certain area. Okay, well, this is an old picture too. It's my wife's old truck, shouldn't have anymore. So if you suspected a child was taking the router somewhere that they shouldn't, or you didn't want them to, you could set up a geofence and get an alert, and you could address it with that student. Also, you can use that with bus drivers or anything else. So you've got a tremendous amount of control here over these devices and what's being done with them. And of course, you're protecting the children as well, okay? One last thing that I thought of, licensing. They do have to have entitlements to continue to function. You can very quickly, clicking under licensing, see what the entitlements are of that router and when its licenses are going to expire. And then if you determine that the router does not need to use an advanced package license anymore, you can change it, okay? Or if you upgraded it and put a bulk of advanced packages in there, and we're gonna divvy them out as needed, you could change and assign how you want it. So a tremendous amount of flexibility. Data usage, you can see the data usage by WAN for both modem and Ethernet, and you can get an idea of what's connected to it. Let's pick a different one because I don't use that for anything. Let's choose this one. Data usage, as I said, provides you insight into how much data you've used, especially with an LTE. It's metered right now. But you can see what categories have been using it. So we do a tremendous amount of streaming in our house, and look who the biggest offender of it is, the Roku stick. Okay. Well, we're a cord cutting family, but if you start getting these massive overage bills from, say, Verizon or AT&T, and you go and look and see, you can go and look and see which unit it was, what it was doing, and you now know that you've got a student streaming Netflix over your LTE, your precious LTE, that is, quite frankly, costing money. And you can go look at that device's configuration, go, oh, well, we forgot to apply the SIPA filter. Or you know what, maybe we applied the SIPA filter, but we didn't turn off streaming media because we use YouTube for some instructional things. Well, now you can go and alter that filter to block Netflix and just allow YouTube, okay? And you've been able to catch yourself and keep yourself in check, okay? There's other things in here as well. You can see what clients were accounted for. So if you're doing any MAC address blacklisting or whitelisting, maybe, or you're not, maybe you need to, because you want to keep that usage restricted just to the device that you've issued to the student. So that, you know, moms and dads aren't getting on their older brothers and sisters or even neighbors saying, hey, I got this network here, I'm going to go use that. You can keep that restricted or determine whether or not you need to restrict it. And then the overall health. This can give you an idea. I use quite frankly, where I live, none of the cellular providers are all that great, though I have to say AT&T has been getting significantly better. They've been growing by leaps and bounds. Not that that is an endorsement of AT&T or any others. But for the data speeds, a couple months ago, they were down in the fair range consistently. But this gives you a really nice idea of if you have an area that may be a dead zone for a particular carrier, okay, and the student is having a very poor experience trying to do their homework or their assignments online, and they're just having all kinds of trouble over that cellular network. You can look at this and determine by looking at this real quick, but also looking at the signal values, and say, well, that's not that great. Let's maybe look at a different carrier for that area. Maybe we need to use Verizon, or maybe we need to use T-Mobile or something of that nature, or maybe we need to have a conversation with the carrier. Okay, but either way, you've gained a tremendous amount of information here to make an informed decision. As we know, making informed decisions can very much save you a lot of money in the long run and improve the quality of the education and the student's experience. Any questions? Oh, looks like we got one. Can 2 or more students learn from home on one Cradlepoint device? Absolutely. The IBR 900 is capable with SIPA filtering turned on and capturing data like this of handling about 10 devices. Now, obviously, as we know, cellular is a connection that will go up and down depending on the loading on that tower. So it's not going to be a guaranteed bandwidth, but comfortably for answering some emails, doing some online research, or accessing Google Docs to type a report or anything like that, absolutely 10 people easily. 2 of them start streaming Netflix at high def, we're gonna have a problem. It's gonna drag that experience down, but obviously you have the tools here to keep that from happening. That answer the question? Okay. That's all I had for the time we have. Does anybody have any additional questions? Okay. Robert, I'm going to give it back to you.
All right. So yeah, I think, you know, for us, we can kind of come into the end of the show here. So just Q&A. I'll leave it open for another 30 seconds or so, just to make sure there's no additional questions. Thank you guys have, I'd like to thank, you know, David for being here from Cradlepoint, helping out, making sure that we didn't get stuck on something that we couldn't answer. There's an email here at the bottom, 2 of them actually, webinars@cradlepoint.com or sales@bytespeed.com. Either of those will get you answers to any of the questions that you do have. Maybe you didn't want to ask, whatever it might be. So I think But oh, I do have a question about CARES money. So CARES money should be able to be used for this type of thing. Additionally, on top of CARES money and whatever you're getting for CARES money, you also are opened up your title money that you got previously, which was previously restricted to 15%, is now open to up to 100%. So you should have a lot of funds between title money, CARES Act money, and what will most likely be additional E-rate funding should be all applicable in the next year towards solutions like this, because at the end of the day, they are providing internet access to students, which is the primary reason the E-rate existed. And without the internet connection, there's no equity and there's no way to provide the same experience for students from home. So one more additional question is there a data limit per router?
I can answer that.
Okay.
By default, no. However, you can set those up in the local GUI of the router or set up alerts and actions within Cradlepoint for a group of routers. So you can rate limit, or in the case of failover, you can make sure certain types of traffic don't go out when you're in a failover situation. There's several ways to accomplish it. The answer is yes, there's ways you can do this, okay? You may want, when you hit say you've got a 20 gig plan and you're just going to deploy a couple of these, you may set each router, and you're going to deploy 4 of them. I'm using easy math here to describe it. You're going to set each one to clamp down and stop communicating at 5 gig, okay, of usage. Or in the case of scenarios where you're using 2 carriers, dual modem, okay, that may be a scenario for whether it be for failover or poor network quality connection. You can still set that up when it reaches a certain amount of usage of data used, or if it reaches a certain perceived throughput, have it shift over to use the other modem, okay? Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. Perfect.
Yeah, and I guess the other thing to mention there would be there is, depending on the modem that's in the device, there is an upper physical limit depending on that modem. But most of the time, with regard to at least 4G, you're not going to, that shouldn't be a factor, I wouldn't think.
Yeah, throughput with cellular is, one thing, as I said, cellular is a metered connection in that you're only given so much data to use per month per billing cycle from each carrier, okay? The throughput, as we all know, is somewhat your perception. However, there's 2 factors here, okay? One is the carrier, we can't control that, okay? So while I'm going to pick on Verizon, for example, there may be a Verizon tower nearby. We don't know what the load is on that tower, okay? So if non-students are getting on and, checking Facebook or streaming a quick YouTube video, that obviously puts a load on that tower, okay? So that can adversely affect a student's experience with this, but it is outside of our control. Now, fortunately, most people aren't using cellular as a primary connection for everyday things like online gaming and streaming video and things like that constantly. It's just not feasible because it is a metered connection, okay? Now, the modems in our devices, the 600M version of the 900 that Robert referenced and the 1200M use what we call carrier aggregation, in that they use a baseband that is the primary band for that carrier in a given area to pass traffic over, And when the throughput is perceived by the router to drop below a certain level based on usage or load on that router, user load, it starts moving data out over an unlicensed band. And the 1200M modem can move that data over up to 5 additional unlicensed bands, therefore keeping that, I'm going to say 80 megabit per second perceived speed for all the users up to a certain point, just like your wireline connection. Okay. So I know that was a lot of technical mumbo jumbo, but I want to make sure that people understood that, like every internet connection, it does have its limits.
Yeah, and I just want to try to cover 2 questions that came in with 1 answer, hopefully. So to be clear that, the Cradlepoint piece, the NetCloud piece is one side of it, right? Is the hardware side and managing the hardware side. You do need to provide a SIM card with a connection plan to a cellular provider, whatever works in that area for you best. Whether that might be AT&T, it might be T-Mobile, it might be Verizon. You could have all 3 depending on what area of the city it's in. So you do need to provide a SIM card from a carrier that is tied to some sort of plan. And that plan could have limits itself. So if you get a 5 gig a month plan from Verizon, put that SIM card in that router, then there would be limitations of 5G on that. And you can enforce those through NetCloud as well, so that you don't have overages. So I think I answered both questions in one there, but all right. I think that's all the questions so far. So there's a thank you slide that has David's name and email address and has my name and email address. Just want to say thank you for showing up. We definitely appreciate your time. Anything follow-up questions that you have, get a hold of David or myself, and we would be more than happy to answer them. Get you quotations on whatever you want. So if you need a solution that's very specific, want 5 buses and this, we'll get you a quote for that and get you taken care of. So thank you again and have a great day.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Robert.
Thank you.